The first time I used the machine, nothing really happened at first. I just stepped out of the pod a minute or so after the lights shut down, and everything seemed the same. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect. I was curious, but when I woke up the following morning, I was 2 inches taller and almost 20 pounds heavier, all muscle. I didn't know what to think, but I definitely got some strange looks when I arrived at work that day. It's not a coincidence that I took the janitorial job at Caltech. For some strange reason, I was always good with math and science growing up, but heavily misguided. And after I pulled a 46-month stretch at Folsom, I had a fairly limited employment options. When my PO handed me the list of current job openings for parolees in this area, I circled the Caltech job right away. It just seemed natural. The second time I used the machine, I was transported to some other place. I think it was maybe another time as well. I don't really know. I was only there for about a minute or two, I think, before I was back in the pod as the lights slowly faded. I did some research when I got home, and I am pretty sure I was somewhere in Cambodia, but I can't say when. Sometime in the last 100 years is my guess. The ancient temples looked familiar, but I could hear the sound of automobiles somewhere in the distance. The next day I woke up and my left ring finger was missing. The third time I used the machine, I visited ancient Rome and stood beside Cassius and Caesar and heard them speak. I don't speak Latin, so I do not know what was said. When I returned, I had an identical twin brother. He couldn't speak at all, but he clearly understood my words. "Follow me," I said, and he followed me down to where my car was parked. We drove back to my place, and I turned up some heavy metal on my stereo system, and then I went to the bedroom and wrapped up the muzzle of my little .22 caliber pistol with a thick, wet towel, and then came back and shot him in the chest just once, hoping the neighbors wouldn't hear. He looked at me in confusion and fear just before I pulled the trigger. Then I rolled him up in an old tarp, cleaned up the blood, and waited for nightfall to drag him out to the parking lot downstairs to dump him into the bed of my Ford F-150 before driving out to the lake. I can't have two of me walking around here. One who can't even speak. What would people think? It's just not tenable. What was I supposed to do? I intentionally timed my cleaning of Lecture Hall 208 until Professor Hallison was scheduled to teach his class of engineering students again that afternoon. I rolled my mop and bucket in towards the end. Recently, through the successful research and development of new technologies that we have labored over for the last 2 decades, I am very proud to announce that we have achieved a breakthrough achievement. One which will fundamentally alter the world as we currently know it. That was all he said. I was hoping to learn much more than that, but he offered no further details. He just muttered something about a non-disclosure agreement and a pending announcement. For just a moment, I thought about beating him to death with the wooden handle of my mop. The fourth time I used the machine was an experience that is very difficult to explain. I basically just found myself in a white space. No walls, no floor, no ceiling. Just an empty white space. I shouted out, but there was no response. I didn't know what to do, so I just started jogging through the endless void. When I returned and the lights in the pod died down, I realized that I was now blind in my left eye. When I got Professor Hallison back to my apartment a week later, I kept the duct tape over his mouth at first and showed him the box cutter. I explained the consequences of any verbal outbursts that might alert my neighbors, and then, when I was confident that he understood everything, I cut a small slit in the tape, trying not to cut his lips. There was a little blood, but not much, and I had a baseball bat and another strip of duct tape hanging from the arm of the chair that I had tied him up in, just in case I had miscalculated his sense of self-preservation. I had the box cutter too. He surely wouldn't scream for very long. "What is it?" "The machine," I asked. He stared at me for a while, So you're the one who has been using it late at night. I wasn't expecting that. What are you saying? What I am saying is that we have a log that digitally records all of the details of the machine's usage. You were fairly clever in your usage of coveralls and baseball caps, and sunglasses and COVID masks. That much fooled the security cameras anyway, but we knew someone was there. We reported it to campus security yesterday. There will be a guard outside of the door from now on. I thought about this for a moment, and then showed him the box cutter again. You didn't answer my question. What is it? He looked at the box cutter and took a slow, resigned breath. The truth is, we just don't know yet. That's why there has been no public announcement. We know we have something. We just don't really know exactly what it is yet. When will you know? It is impossible to say right now. Well, how can we undo the things that it has done? I pointed out my milky white left eye, intentionally using the middle finger next to where my ring finger on my left hand was. It was not meant to be a subtle gesture. It is impossible to say right now. I used the box cutter and I cleaned up the blood. Then I got the tarp and waited until sundown before dragging him out of the bed of my truck. I had a headache and a nosebleed. I had not eaten anything or slept a wink in the last 3 days. The 5th time I used the machine was the last. I had to kill the security guard just outside of the doors of the lab first. I really didn't want to do that. I ended up here in a strange, unknown place, and I have not returned. Swampland. I have no idea where I am or even when I am, but I think I saw a small dinosaur running through the woods this morning. My left leg was gone below the knee when I arrived here, so I've mostly just been sitting with my back pressed up against this tree. I really don't know what else to do. I cannot walk. They say curiosity killed the cat. I am the cat. Ever since they moved into her grandmother's old house way up on top of Bannockburn Hill, he had woken up every morning at 3:33 a.m. without fail. He hated the old house. He hated the way it looked on the outside, with its drab, gray walls, and he loathed the way it looked on the inside. This house always seemed to be doing something. It was an ugly monstrosity, but his wife had insisted they stay, and so he did what he always did. He muttered under his breath and kept silent, and commuted to work with minimal complaint and fuss. He was beginning to suspect the house hated him too, because every night at 3:33 a.m., it seemed to find a way to wake him up. Sometimes it was as simple as a creaky floorboard. Other times, it was more elaborate. The soft thudding of footsteps in the attic right above their bedroom. The old grandfather clock in the foyer chiming out 13 times at random intervals. Or the shutters on the windows outside their room slamming shut on a windless night. The eerie sound of tapping and scratching from the old, gnarled tree next to the bedroom window. Once, it was the soft laughter of a child, echoing, cackling laughter in all directions. And sometimes it was nothing. Nothing at all. He would simply wake up as soon as the clock changed from 3:32 to 3:33 a.m. Their room was at the top of the stairs, and from his side of the bed, he could peer down into the darkness below. It was so dark at night, the place is pitch black. Sometimes he could only see the 5th step, but he often got the feeling that something or someone was standing there, just past that 5th step, staring at him from the black with a menacing grin, daring him to walk down the terrifying steps. He didn't want to, but he couldn't help it. Like somebody that drives past a road accident, they just have to see the broken, smashed car. A dark, seductive curiosity. He had to look down the foreboding steps, his tired eyes unadjusted to the dark, always playing tricks on him. He would get up and turn on the light and find the stairs completely empty. His wife didn't believe him, of course. He told her the stories. Every morning he seemed awake with a new one. She told him it was just his imagination. She said things like, "Stop it with that nonsense and get ready for work, otherwise you'll be late, dear." By the afternoon, he'd usually managed to convince himself that she was right. It was just his imagination. He'd always had a wild one since he was a child. But the madness of it all was, he wasn't imagining anything, and his wife was lying to him. She was in on the trick, a part of the gag. For the house had gotten to her first, and together they had hatched a wicked plan. It sunk its hooks deep into her soul, and she would belong to the house forever, its ever faithful servant. Racing thoughts, suspicion, and doubts, whispering, shouting in his mind, "She's part of it." A race against the clock, and he had no idea or a clue. He should have started running long ago. He was never going to get wise and get out. He was marked for death, and thus was doomed. He awoke one night, like all the others, at 3:33 a.m. It was always 3:33. The time of night when spirits, friendly or not, are most active. When this old house would come alive. Only this time, it was different. His wife wasn't next to him. The space where her warm body had been sound asleep was as empty and cold like ice. And then he heard something. Faint whispering. He heard a moan, low and steady, that seemed to stretch forever and into infinity and beyond. It entered through his ears and lodged itself into his head, growing louder, sending a chill icier than frozen water down his spine. It was accompanied by persistent rhythmic squeaking, like someone shifting their weight back and forth on a loose floorboard over and over and over again. The wind picked up outside and howled like a banshee with a megaphone, with a banging on the bedroom window with a loud tapping every few seconds. And the child from several nights ago chimed in to add its soft echoing laughter to the orchestra of eerie and foreboding sounds. He turned over and stared into the darkness, down to that fifth step, and felt his heart freeze in his chest. He saw something this time. His heart stopped, sweat beading on his brow, and he held his breath. A silhouette clear as day, swaying back and forth, ever so slightly, in rhythm with the creepy house orchestra, was standing just past that fifth step. The lights flashed on with an audible crack, for just a split second, then cut out just as quickly, but he'd seen it. He'd seen her. She was wild, tangled, raven black hair which is unkempt, and long flowing past her shoulders and blowing in an unnatural wind without wind on the stairs. The dark shadows around her crazed eyes are as black as coal. The whites of her eyes were streaked with crimson blood vessels, red snakes swimming in a sea of frozen ice. There was no mistaking it. His eyes were not playing tricks on him. He was not imagining anything else. "Is everything okay?" he called out to his wife. All the noise ceased. He could see her lips curling upwards into the wickedest of smiles. Deep down, he knew the answer to that question was no. He knew he would not receive a reply. Doom and despair hung in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. But the man's mind still tried to convince himself he was dreaming. Last attempt of a sane mind. He tried to convince himself that he was fine, that all was well. He hoped his wife was still his wife. He hoped the devilish and possessed creature of the darkness standing on the steps was someone else. Something else. He hoped the pure evil that had come for him in the night and now faced him, leering with an insatiable bloodlust, was a mistake, an aberration, a trick of the mind. He hoped that if he closed his eyes tight enough and concentrated hard enough, it would soon be morning and the terrifying scene before him would cease to exist. He really hoped.